Something they left out of Oppenheimer is that following the tests in New Mexico, we bombed the Marshall Islands, and we did not do a very good job of cleaning it up for the people who lived there. The very first victims of atomic radiation were residents in New Mexico. White Sands was not an isolated area. They had people living 12 miles away, mostly minorities, and they ended up with very high rates of cancer, and still do to this day. It's still radioactive. Feasibly understanding that radiation was dangerous by that point, the United States entered into an agreement with Britain to develop nuclear weapons, and they decided that the Marshall Islands were the perfect place to do it. They are relatively isolated from large nations, but they had people living there. These were poor people living on coral atolls, which is essentially a ring-shaped island that's only slightly elevated from the water. We're going to get into why that's also really bad. Prior to the nuclear detonation, they did remove people from certain islands and promised them that they could go back once they were remediated. In exchange, they gave them food and financial support. And at the end of the tests, they took all of that nuclear waste and put it into a concrete dome on Ruinant Island, one of the uninhabited islands of the Marshall Islands chain. One such island that people were allowed to return to was Bikini Atoll. And following the reintroduction of people, they found that kids were getting cancer directly linked to the radiation. So they evacuated it again, cleaned it up a little bit better, and brought people back about 10 years later to find that, again, they started having high levels of cancer, even though scientists said it's as radioactive as the background. It's fine. People in the Marshall Islands are still suffering from very high cancer rates and miscarriage. And this concrete dome is likely leaking. Scientists have found levels of radiation in the surrounding water that suggest it is leaking. You have to remember, we made this before we understood that we could use bacteria like Geobacter to solidify the nuclear waste and keep it from seeping into the water. During our time testing nuclear bombs in the area, we dropped 67 atomic bombs. The idea of that one little concrete case keeping all of that radiation from spreading everywhere in the Pacific is a little bit scary. Now you know.